September 15th, 1916, 6:20 a.m. Somme Valley, France. The morning fog clung to the trenches like a living thing, heavy, damp, unrelenting. Soldiers could barely see more than a few feet ahead. The air was thick with the stench of oil, cordite, and decay. Somewhere in the distance, a whistle shrieked, and the ground began to tremble. Then it appeared. A shape, massive and metallic, crawled through the mist, its treads grinding through the mud, gears shrieking with each rotation. Men froze in disbelief. Some thought it was a trick, others a monster. But it was neither. It was the world's first tank, a machine named Mother. It wasn't fast, it wasn't elegant, but it was unstoppable. Bullets pinged off its steel armor as it rolled toward the German lines, its cannons belching smoke and fire. For the first time in history, the battlefield had witnessed the birth of a weapon designed not by soldiers, but by engineers. And with that mechanical groan, warfare itself changed forever. World War I wasn't just a war between nations, it was a war between centuries. The 19th century's traditions of cavalry, muskets, and heroism collided with the 20th century's new gods of industry, engineering, and mass production. Factories, not fortresses, became the heart of military power. Steam engines turned into weapons. Conveyor belts fed the front lines as much as they fed the cities. The nations that once competed for colonies now competed to re-engineer destruction. The result? A new kind of war, a mechanical war. Inside those trenches, men felt the shift long before they understood it. They no longer fought enemies they could see. They fought noise, the chattering of machine guns, the deafening roar of artillery, the sky itself buzzing with aircraft. The battlefield became a factory floor, precise, systematic, merciless. Each invention was a solution to a problem, and each solution created new horrors. The tank was born to break the stalemate. The machine gun was made to defend against waves of men. The aircraft was built to see what no eye could, and later to kill what no soldier could reach. And together, they formed the trinity that would define modern war. Humanity believed that technology would make life easier. Instead, it made death more efficient. In the laboratories of Europe, innovation and annihilation became twins, bound by ambition and fear. For every new advancement came an equal and opposite tragedy. What began as curiosity in peacetime became catastrophe in war, and in 1914 the world discovered that progress had a price tag, paid not in gold but in blood. August 1914, Belgium, dawn. A unit of German soldiers crouched in the tall grass, rifles clutched tightly in trembling hands. The morning was quiet, almost too quiet. Then the silence shattered. A harsh mechanical rattle ripped through the air. 1, 2, 10 men fell before anyone understood what had happened. The weapon was unseen, hidden behind sandbags and smoke, but its rhythm was unmistakable, a continuous, heartless staccato. That was the sound of the Maxim gun, the world's first fully automatic machine gun. It fired 600 rounds per minute, powered not by muscle, but by recoil. For the first time, a single man could kill hundreds without reloading, and with each pull of the trigger, the balance of warfare tilted further from courage toward calculation. Before the war, generals still spoke of honor. They imagined cavalry charges, men with sabers drawn, banners flying. But the machine gun erased all that. When British cavalry charged at the Battle of Mons in 1914, they were met not by men, but by mechanical firewalls. Horse and rider crumpled in an instant, swallowed by smoke and steel. By the time the guns fell silent, the ground was littered with what one soldier called a harvest of the brave. The machine gun made bravery obsolete. No matter how courageous a soldier was, he could not outrun 600 bullets a minute. The genius and the horror of the machine gun lay in its efficiency. Unlike rifles, it didn't demand accuracy. It demanded endurance, an operator to keep the barrel cool, to feed the belt, to clear the jam. In a strange way, it was teamwork redefined. 3 men working in perfect coordination, not to save lives, but to erase them faster. For the soldiers on the other side, it was psychological warfare. They could hear the gun long before they saw it, a rhythm like a heartbeat from hell. It wasn't just bullets that killed, it was the anticipation, the knowledge that death was now mechanical, impartial, unrelenting. The British Vickers gun, a descendant of Maxim's design, became a symbol of industrial death. Weighing nearly 50 pounds, it was cooled by water, fed by endless belts of ammunition, and could maintain sustained fire for hours. At the Battle of the Somme, British gunners fired over 1 million rounds in a single day. The barrels glowed red. Water boiled away, and men refilled cooling jackets with anything they could find, even urine. It was grotesque, desperate, and effective. Machine guns weren't just weapons, they were machines of attrition. They didn't decide who won, only how long men could last before they broke. The machine gun didn't just kill soldiers, it killed strategies, traditions, and illusions. It taught generals that numbers no longer meant strength, that courage couldn't cross a no-man's land ruled by mechanics. It was fear made tangible, a weapon that didn't aim for glory but for volume. It made war a mathematical equation, input bullets, output corpses. And yet, even as millions died under its rattle, the world still believed it could build a weapon that would end all wars. They were wrong. Because the machine gun didn't end war, it merely prepared the stage for something worse. September 15th, 1916. Somme Valley. Mud. Blood. Silence. Then thunder. From the grey, mist. A metal beast groaned forward, its treads chewed through craters and corpses alike. Inside, men sat cramped in boiling heat, choking on fumes. The sound was deafening. The grinding of gears, the hiss of oil, the mechanical heartbeat of something both terrifying and magnificent. This was Mark I, the first tank in history. To the soldiers in the trenches, it was like watching the future crawl out of the ground. The idea for the tank didn't come from generals. It came from engineers, men who looked at tractors and saw the bones of a new kind of weapon. In 1915, Britain's Landships Committee was formed, led by Winston Churchill. Their mission, to create a machine that could cross trenches, crush barbed wire, and break the stalemate. What emerged was crude. A 28-ton steel box, armed with machine guns and cannons, moving at a mere 3.7 miles per hour. But it was revolutionary. The first tanks rolled out at the Battle of the Somme. Many broke down before reaching the front. Some caught fire. But a few, a precious few, kept moving. And when they did, fear rippled through the German lines. They called them devil's wagons. Soldiers dropped their weapons and ran. For the first time in 2 years, the immovable wall of trench warfare began to crack. Operating a tank in 1916 was less like driving and more like surviving. Temperatures inside reached over 50 degrees. The noise of the engine drowned out all speech. Fumes filled the confined air until men fainted. The gunners worked in the dark, aiming through slits barely wider than a coin. The driver fought constantly against the gears. There was no suspension. Every shell crater was a jolt. Every hit a shock wave through steel and bone. But in that chaos there was something else. Belief. The belief that man could build something to conquer the impossible. The tank was not just a weapon. It was a philosophy of motion, a statement that humans could dominate not just each other, but the terrain itself. Soon, every major power raced to copy the design. France developed the Renault FT, small and nimble, with a rotating turret, a feature that would define tanks for the next century. Germany, slow to adapt, realized too late that the battlefield was evolving beyond barbed wire and bayonets. Factories that once built cars, trains, and farm tools now built machines of war. The Industrial Revolution had found its ultimate experiment, mechanized death. The early tanks were far from perfect. Of the 49 tanks used in their debut at the Somme, only 32 made it to the starting line. Just 9 crossed into German territory, but even those 9 changed everything. They inspired both awe and dread, a glimpse into a future where human flesh would always be outmatched by steel and fire. By 1918, thousands of tanks rolled across Europe. But the lesson they taught was not one of victory, it was one of dependence. Wars would now be won not by courage alone, but by who could build faster, stronger, deadlier. The tank symbolized power, yet inside it, men were as fragile as ever. Each shell, each jammed gear, each suffocating breath reminded them that they were still mortal, trapped in a steel coffin they called salvation. What began as innovation soon became addiction. The world had learned to rely on machines, and in doing so, had surrendered part of its humanity. The tank was not the end of fear, it was its evolution. August 1914, the skies over France. 2 fragile biplanes circle each other like wary birds. Wooden frames creak, fabric wings flutter, and engines cough through the thin morning air. There are no guns, only cameras and courage. One pilot waves, the other tips his wings in reply. Then, weeks later, those same pilots returned with pistols strapped to their thighs. By 1915, they carried machine guns, and by 1916, the sky had become a battlefield. At the start of the Great War, aircraft were toys, used for reconnaissance, not combat. Their mission: map enemy trenches, track artillery, and report troop movements. But the moment an observer spotted a rival plane in the distance, instinct took over. They began throwing bricks, grenades, even wrenches at one another. Soon pistols became rifles, rifles became synchronized guns, time to fire through spinning propellers without shattering the blades. A mechanical miracle that changed history. The man behind it was a German engineer named Anton Fokker. His Eindecker fighter could fire straight ahead, letting pilots aim the entire plane like a weapon. The result was the Fokker scourge, a reign of terror where Allied pilots were cut from the sky like falling crows. Early aircraft were marvels of fragility. Thin canvas stretched over wooden ribs, powered by engines that could stall at a sudden gust. The average flight ceiling? Barely 12,000 feet. The average pilot lifespan in 1916? 3 weeks. Yet they flew anyway. Each mission was a tightrope between heaven and hell. Fuel leaked, oil sprayed into faces, parachutes were forbidden. Officers feared they'd make pilots too willing to jump. Inside those open cockpits, the world shrank to wind, vibration, and fear. The pilot wasn't a soldier anymore. He was an experiment, testing how far flesh could go when tethered to machine. Out of chaos rose the myth of the air race, a hero for a war that had none. Names like Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron, and Albert Ball became legends. They painted their planes bright crimson or stark white, not for camouflage, but for psychological warfare. To be seen was to be feared. Each duel was both deadly and theatrical, a performance of skill and ego in the thin air above Europe. For soldiers drowning in mud below, these men became almost mythic, proof that somewhere amid the slaughter, glory still existed. But even in the sky, glory had a price. By 1917, airplanes no longer merely watched, they destroyed. The first bombing raids began with pilots, dropping hand grenades by sight. Soon, nations developed specialized bombercraft capable of carrying hundreds of pounds of explosives. Cities once considered untouchable now trembled at the hum of engines overhead. London, Paris, Berlin. For the first time in history, war had escaped the battlefield and entered the civilian world. Anti-aircraft guns emerged in defense, lighting the night with streaks of fire. The sky became a chessboard of death, strategy, physics, and fear intertwined. The air war changed how humanity perceived danger. No longer confined to earth, death could now fall from the clouds. Every horizon became suspect. It was progress and prophecy. The fragile biplanes of 1914 were the ancestors of every jet, every bomber, every drone. The pilots who once soared for reconnaissance had unknowingly written the blueprint for apocalypse. They believed they were pioneering the future. They were. They just didn't know what kind of future it would be. Birmingham, England, 1916. The clang of metal never stopped. Sparks lit the air like fireflies in a furnace. Rows of women in grease-stained uniforms stood before heavy presses, stamping out shell casings faster than soldiers could fire them. Children worked beside them, small hands reaching into dangerous gaps, because every second, somewhere in France, another gun demanded to be fed. This was not a battlefield of trenches. This was the arsenal of modern war. The First World War was the first to be fought not only by men, but by machines, and those machines demanded an empire of labor behind them. For every soldier on the front, there were 10 workers behind him: miners, mechanics, chemists, and machinists. Germany's Krupp factories produced artillery on a scale unseen in history. Britain's Vickers, France's Schneider, and America's Bethlehem Steel followed suit. Each nation transformed its economy into a weapon. Food, fuel, steel, and sweat all became part of the same supply chain of survival. It was the age of total war, where every citizen was a cog in the killing machine. While men fought in the trenches, it was women who fought in the foundries. In Britain alone, more than 900,000 women joined munitions factories. They mixed chemicals, loaded shells, and braved explosions that could ignite with a single spark of static. Their skin turned yellow from TNT poisoning, earning them the nickname Canary Girls. They risked blindness, burns, and suffocation, but they also redefined what it meant to serve. The factory floor became a front line without uniforms or medals. Each shell stamped, each rivet tightened, was a silent strike against the enemy. And yet, when peace came, many of these women were dismissed, their sacrifice buried beneath victory parades. World War I was fought not by ideals, but by statistics. Every bullet required brass, powder, and precision. Every tank needed 1,000 feet of steel plate and 6,000 man-hours of labor. Armies know. Longer measured strength by courage, but by production output. Who could manufacture more, faster, cheaper? That became the question that decided who lived and who lost. Between 1914 and 1918, Britain alone produced over 75 million shells. The US, entering the war late, mobilized over 100,000 new factories in less than 2 years. Germany, under blockade, turned to synthetic fuels and nitrates, the beginning of chemical industry warfare. Every invention became a double-edged sword, technology that promised progress but delivered destruction. In the laboratories of Ypres and Langemarck, scientists were no longer healers. They were engineers of death. From chlorine gas to mustard gas, chemistry became the silent killer of the trenches. These gases didn't just burn lungs, they dissolved the idea of honor. Soldiers once trained to face their enemy now died unseen, suffocated by the invisible. The men who created these weapons, like Fritz Haber, the Nobel Prize-winning chemist, believed they were serving science and country, but even he would later call it a curse that changed the nature of warfare and the soul of man. The line between invention and sin had vanished. The war was not won by the strongest army. It was sustained by the loudest machines. The men who died in trenches were the final product of an assembly line that began in the soot of Birmingham, Essen, and Detroit. It was the first war where technology outpaced humanity. Factories no longer made tools to build life, they made tools to perfect death. The battlefield may have ended in mud, but it was born in steel. London, 1915. The posters were everywhere, pasted on brick walls, hung in train stations, slid under doors, a single image, A soldier pointing, eyes sharp, finger aimed directly at the passerby. The caption read, "Your country needs you." For the first time, printing presses and psychology became weapons of war. The Great War wasn't fought only in trenches or skies. It was fought in hearts and minds. And technology made that possible. When the guns of 1914 thundered, governments realized something terrifying. If machines could manufacture bullets, they could also manufacture belief. Printing, photography, cinema, and telegraph lines became part of the arsenal. Posters urged men to enlist. Pamphlets painted enemies as monsters. Films like The Battle of the Somme showed sanitized heroism, carefully edited to inspire, not horrify. Propaganda wasn't just persuasion. It was engineering emotion. And for many, it worked. Millions volunteered. Millions believed. Millions marched to their deaths with hope printed on paper. The moving image was still young, but governments quickly understood its power. Film could do what no speech could. It could show victory, even when none existed. In 1916, Britain released The Battle of the Somme, the first feature-length war documentary. Crowds wept and cheered in theatres, unaware that much of the footage had been staged. It didn't matter. The emotional truth was enough. Cinema became the new battlefield. One fought with frames and feelings instead of shells and shrapnel. Every nation soon followed. Germany's UFA Studios, France's Gaumont, and America's Committee on Public Information turned reels into recruitment drives. Technology had created not only machines of war, but machines of meaning. In the age of industrial warfare, morale was as vital as munitions. Soldiers needed faith to survive endless slaughter. Civilians needed hope to endure hunger and loss. So technology filled the gap. Wireless radios carried speeches across continents. Photographs of smiling troops hid the horror of amputations. Letters were censored, rewritten, reshaped, to maintain the illusion of purpose. Governments learned that truth was malleable, that a well-crafted lie could fuel an army longer than food. In this war, propaganda wasn't deceit. It was maintenance, the lubrication of the national machine. Machines gave humanity a new illusion that every invention, no matter how lethal, was somehow progress, that every new gear or gun was proof of civilization's triumph. But progress in 1917 was measured not in knowledge, but in kilotons of destruction. The same factories that once built bicycles now built bombers. The same engineers who invented telegraphs were now perfecting detonation timers. The world was modernizing itself into madness. And yet amid that madness, there was pride, the intoxicating belief that mankind was advancing, even as it burned. By 1918, technology had achieved something remarkable and monstrous. It had united millions of strangers under a single delusion, that war could be perfected. Propaganda became the oil that kept the engines of despair running. It didn't just shape opinion, it sustained obedience. The real victory of World War I wasn't military, it was psychological, a triumph of machinery over morality. And once the war ended, the machines didn't stop. They simply waited for the next reason to turn back on. November 11th, 1918, 11 a.m. The guns fell silent. Men stood in disbelief, not because the war was over, but because silence itself felt unnatural. For 4 long years they had lived in the rhythm of artillery, engines, and screams. Now even peace sounded mechanical, an echo of something that could never truly stop. The world had survived the first war of machines, but it would never be the same. When the armistice was signed, the weapons didn't vanish. They were studied, improved, reborn. Engineers disassembled tanks, rewired machine guns, reimagined aircraft. The laboratories that once produced weapons of survival now turned to innovation, disguised as progress. The Renault FT, the light French tank, became the blueprint for nearly every armored vehicle of the 20th century. Its rotating turret, a simple concept, would soon define battlefield dominance. By the 1930s, that design had evolved into the Panzer, the Matilda, and the Sherman, each an echo of the Somme first rumbling monsters. The Vickers and Maxim machine guns evolved too, lighter, deadlier, easier to carry. War had learned to move. And the sky? It never gave up its claim. The fragile wooden biplanes became metal birds, monoplanes, then bombers, then fleets capable of leveling cities. The machines had survived the men who made them. Factories that once built shells began producing cars. Aviation companies shifted to mail delivery, then passenger travel. The war had accelerated technology so violently that peacetime couldn't keep up. It merely repurposed the chaos. The automobile industry, radio communication, and aviation all owed their rapid development to war laboratories. Even medicine advanced, as surgeons learned to rebuild bodies shattered by metal. The prosthetic limb became the first symbol of post-war innovation. Half miracle, half reminder. Humanity had discovered it could create faster than it could feel, and that imbalance would haunt every decade to come. The world swore, never again. But nations didn't dismantle their war machines. They perfected them. Germany, restricted by the Treaty of Versailles, secretly continued tank and aircraft experiments. Britain and France, while calling for peace, drafted blueprints for mechanized armies. The United States turned its industrial boom into an arms market. World War I was not the end of conflict, it was the prototype. A rehearsal for even greater horrors. By 1939, the tanks roared again, faster, heavier, more ruthless. The machine gun became lighter, the aircraft deadlier, the bombs smarter. The same engineers who once celebrated peace were now designing annihilation with precision and pride. The future that WWI invented had arrived, and it was hungry. In the quiet years between wars, a new kind of thinking took root. If machines could solve the problem of stalemate, could they also solve the problem of victory? The military answer was yes. The human answer was never asked. Every major power began to believe that technology could outthink morality, that innovation was an end in itself. The tank, the aircraft, and the gun had become symbols of civilization's evolution, and yet beneath their shine the same darkness lingered, progress without conscience. World War I didn't just change the tools of war, it changed the soul of innovation. Every engine, every weapon, every idea born from that war carried a paradox, that the same hands capable of creation were capable of extinction. The tank became a monument to endurance, the machine gun a reminder of precision without mercy. The aircraft, a dream that traded freedom for dominance. The men who built them wanted victory. What they built instead was the mechanical age of humanity's fragility. Somme, France, present day. Rusting tank hulls lie half buried in grass. Machine. Guns rest beneath museum glass, silent but not forgotten. And in every modern weapon, from drones to guided missiles, lives a spark of 1914, because the First World War never truly ended. It simply evolved. The same ambition that built Mother still drives the gears of progress. The same faith in machinery still promises salvation. But every invention whispers the same warning. We are still learning how to control what we create. September 15th, 1916. 6:20 a.m., Somme Valley, France. The fog still lingers in memory. A tank named Mother still crawls forward in black and white footage, slow, unsteady, unstoppable. Its armor is rusted now, its gears long silent. But listen closely, and you can still hear it breathing. Because Mother was never just a machine. It was the birth cry of a new species, the mechanical human instinct. In every modern weapon there's a whisper from that first battlefield of mud and madness. In every drone strike, every satellite-guided missile, every automated defense system lives the same promise that once rolled across the Somme. This machine will make war cleaner, quicker, smarter. But machines do not make promises. Humans do, and humans forget. The Great War didn't end when the guns went silent. It ended when humanity realized that its greatest invention, technology, could no longer be separated from its greatest flaw, itself. Each invention had a soul: the machine gun, precision without empathy; the tank, strength without grace; the aircraft, freedom corrupted by control. Together they built the new anatomy of war, an anatomy we still wear, now hidden beneath the silicon and circuits of our age. For all our progress, we are still the same species that once believed a better engine could end suffering. We just made the engines faster. History never truly ends. It only upgrades. The men who died believing they fought the last war would never imagine a world where machines fought without them. And yet, here we are, their ghosts humming through the circuits of our creation. The fog of the Somme has lifted, but the question remains: if innovation defines us, then what restrains us? A broken tank, half sunk in the French mud. Wind rustles through the overgrown field, and then silence. A voice calm and cold. The future wasn't built in the sky or the trenches. It was built in the spaces between invention and consequence. And that is where we still live, somewhere between the miracle and the machine.